You're about to enter into Monica's universe, where her inquiry may align you to new dimensions. You're about to cross a threshold into the unknown. Surrender to the experience. From the tower, far away I see. Well, I am silent no more. Quote, man can choose either to identify himself with the results of the past, to become a creative participant in the unfolding of a new cycle. Dane, Rudhyar, The Pulse of Life. End of quote. The question these days that arises inside of me is, how do you rebuild when everything is crumbling and what stands up is just the columns of old structures that no longer stand? How do you rebuild? What do you save? What do you actually eliminate for good? Because of having been under the weather for over 3 weeks, it was for sure a reset that my body needed, especially as my nervous system was being rewired from the core. My body started showing signs of needing more sleep, less food, and taking more time to remain still so I could slowly adapt and restructure. Although I do not label myself as being sick, I see it as an opportunity to remove old tracks. The first week was hard. Having come back from Medellin, old tracks were again flaring. These tracks, I have come to understand, are often unconscious sensory or emotional imprints, echoes of past moments that, when touched again by a familiar place, a scent, a voice, or a feeling, can quietly awaken stored patterns in the body. Environmental or emotional reminders from Medellin or similar contexts may have reignited these patterns in my nervous system, briefly reactivating parts of a previously unresolved or healing biological program. The second week slowly showed me that rest, stillness, sleep, and no food were medicine. Any relationship to the outside world I met with distance and emotional maturity. There was no space for error. I'm starting the third week, which follows a time of profound realizations. It is all about integration. Today, under the rays of the sun, and with colder weather than usual, my bronchi are responding to bone broth and soft care. My body, it seems, still knows exactly what it's doing. I still cannot see the full clarity of things, just a glimpse. What I see is that we are in the middle of a mess. Too many things to be distracted by. Too many emotions from others that can spoil or contaminate my environment. I do not need to react to anybody's low self esteem or expectations of me. I am fully activated as a responsible being. I see the panic of the markets. I see the panic of everybody being on a list and trying hard to discriminate others. Even a war season is a circus. Why bother? Why are you still surprised? We live in a psyop of a psyop of a psyop. Nothing that you have experienced in your life since you were born is true, nor your parents and grandparents. Nothing. From all the bullshit they gave you in kindergarten, preschool, high school, and furthermore, if you went through academia, then you are triple screwed. And if you engage in any kind of activity that has a very specific way of achieving success, then you have been severely programmed. I managed to understand where I've been shaped by propaganda and how to get out of certain parts. I still find that there were things that were severely conditioning me. So, again, the question is how to rebuild. This is a time of creation. The fourth turning is here, but you do not have to wait until the last day. You start rebuilding already. Too many distractions? Well, some discipline for Christ's sake. Why do people want to wait until the last building falls before acting? Because they previously ignored the signs. That is why others have made radical changes and are now planting seeds elsewhere. One thing that I do, because my body has asked me to, is to stand objectively at the tower or mountain view. Just observe, annotate, breathe. Do not think, do not analyze, do not judge, just absorb. Thank God for my variables. I have three rights and one left. PRL, DRR. This combination means having a focused, logical, and forward thinking mindset paired with a body that thrives on a go with the flow, laid back, and intuitive lifestyle. I am ingesting information, but not in a homework or frenetic way. I'm just picking things up, sleeping a lot, processing in the background. I turn to sleep as a way of reestablishing a connection to my body. It has been really cold in Miami. I do not remember having freezing temperatures since I moved here, but it is what it is. So I have used the time to cocoon and sleep. Thank God for sleep. I am also rereading Aristotle, who always gives me so much inspiration about ethics and about the difference between practicing virtues for excellence and mentally masturbating with postmodern ideas that are good only for indoctrination and have no practical function in society whatsoever. You can see that right now, heavily. Ask any pop star or protester. Eye roll emoji. A quality of observation. Aquarius time carries a quality of observation that asks for distance and perspective, where there is no rush to calculate outcomes or predict results, but rather a need to reassess everything from a wider field of awareness. It is a moment to see how networks are connected, how systems speak to one another, and how meaning emerges through relationships rather than isolated acts. From an evolutionary astrology perspective, this is a phase where orientation comes through perception, through sensing the whole landscape before taking any step that becomes personal or emotional. Individual positioning clarifies once the web is visible, once the connections are understood, and responsibility is grounded in awareness of how everything relates to everything else. Then one steps into the field to contribute. It is interesting to watch that the structures that have fallen are the ones completely made by the fiat standard and all its ideas of achievement, reputation, honor, and linear advancement. With social media breaking down because it has collapsed, you do not even know who's talking to you anymore, whether it is a person or a bot or something pre programmed. Images are altered, everything is a script. There's no real talent out there, to be honest. Where is the charisma? Where is the reality? Everything is a fabrication. Because you can see it through so much right now, it is just a joke. It is a joke to even want to participate in this level of people with titles and so called achievements that say more about the process of becoming indoctrinated than about what they actually did to become liberated. And so it is hilarious. And Aquarius is all about observing that. I have a good sense of humor, so I'm just having fun watching everything implode. Everything implodes slowly. It takes time before it dissolves into nothingness. And then from there, little seeds can sprout into something completely different. I have no idea what the new thing will be, but it is definitely not going to be standing on columns of stupidity. The fourth turning gives away to creativity, and it helps to remember that it is a cycle within a cycle, roughly 83 years nested inside a larger and smaller rhythms that are always relational rather than absolute. No single framework, fourth turning included, gets to be the final authority because orientation comes from understanding where one stands within overlapping cycles rather than submitting to a single narrative. From this perspective, what is ending now are systems that lost their reason for being, structures that continue to operate without remembering why they existed in the first place. Economics, institutions, and reputational hierarchies built after Bretton Woods in 1944 are clearly giving way to something else, whether one participates consciously or waits passively for the announcement that compliance has exchanged autonomy for comfort. Where am I standing now? I'm in the tower, observing creatively. I've been clearing a lot of things that I no longer need. And at the same time, I have started new things that I'm not going to disclose. for it is an intimate rebuilding moment, not a time for broadcasting. And I'm only interested in sharing how I am observing. I am the observer, and at the same time, I am the creator. But I do not disclose the creative work until it's not sculpted. Speaking too early can jinx the process. For Aristotle, societies do not crumble because of external shocks, but because they lose the telos, their shared orientation towards the good. A polis or city exists for more than survival, exchange, or administration. It exists to cultivate eudaimonia, happiness, human flourishing through virtue. When honor, wealth, and reputation or power replace virtue as organizing principles, the structure hollows out from within. Means are mistaken for ends. Technique replaces purpose, and coherence gives way to factionalism, imitation without substance, and instability. Aristotle ties this directly to education and character, insisting that laws alone cannot sustain a society that no longer forms its citizens ethically. Without shared cultivation of virtue, action is driven by appetite, comparison, and ambition rather than reasoned choice, producing excess and imbalance rather than meaningful common life. Genius innovator. Quote, when I was a young person, I went to the university and I learned a rational language to think with the left side of the brain. But in the right side of the brain, you have intuition and imagination. Words are not the truth. They indicate the way to go, but you need to go alone, in silence. Symbols have a language that kills the words. Alejandro Jodorowsky, end of quote. I also want to name one of the greatest minds and souls born in the last century, an Aquarian soul, someone still alive, lucid, and creating at 96 years old. Alejandro Jodorowsky has always understood transformation as something that must be embodied. His work never separated art, healing, and initiation because he knew that consciousness does not reorganize through theory alone. Through psychomagic and his revival of the Tarot de Marseille, he treated symbols as living structures capable of reorienting the psyche. Often labeled as cult, his films were never marginal in intent, they were initiatory. As an Aquarius, his contribution belongs to the lineage of those who dismantle inherited forms so something genuinely alive can emerge. Another quote from Jodorowsky. I never know if my picture is a good picture or a bad picture because I'm not making pictures thinking of the public. I'm making pictures to realize myself. End of quote. In his natal chart, the south node of the moon is in Scorpio conjunct Juno, pointing to deep karmic familiarity with the underworld, taboo knowledge, and intense bonds. The skip step dynamic involving the Aquarius Sun and Pisces Pallas Athena reveals an evolutionary necessity to translate the death into vision, symbolism, and collective meaning, rather than remaining trapped in personal or relational intensity. Neptune at 0 degrees of Virgo, also a skip step with the nodes, acts as a threshold, dissolving boundaries between psyche and body, myth and healing. This is where psychomagic is present as precise intervention, where transcendence enters form through the concrete acts of, and symbols. His Gemini moon and Mars emphasize the trickster's mind, the storyteller, the provocateur, using language, images, and paradox to destabilize fixed meanings and invite participation. The Jupiter Chiron conjunction in Taurus grounds the entire chart in healing and value, insisting that transformation must be fully embodied. A Pluto in Cancer soul, squaring Venus in Aries and Black Moon Lilith in Capricorn, the soul theme centers on transforming inherited emotional patterns and collective fear into creative courage and radical authenticity. There is a lifelong tension between vulnerability and authority, instinct and imposed structure, which explains his insistence on breaking psychic conditioning through art, ritual, and symbolic shock that awakens rather than comforts. Another quote. I have an ambition to live 300 years. I will not live 300 years. Maybe I will live one more year, but I have the ambition. Why you will not have ambition? Why? Have the greatest ambition possible. You want to be immortal? Fight to be immortal. Do it. You want to make the most fantastic art or movie? Try. If you fail, it's not important. We need to try. Alejandro Jodorowsky. So I'm wishing you fantastic Aquarian days. There's a quote here that speaks about psychomagic, a symbolic healing practice developed by Alejandro Jodorowsky that uses precise poetic acts to address unconscious conflicts. Psychomagic operates on the premise that the psyche responds more directly to symbol, gesture, and ritual than to rational explanation alone. Rather than analyzing trauma, it stages an intentional act that speaks the language of the unconscious, allowing emotional patterns, inherited imprints, and internalized narratives to be released or reconfigured through lived experience. I leave you also with 3 videos that are very interesting. One is like, who is Alejandro Jodorowsky? So it's more like about his art. The other one is a short interview where he explains the time he met Kanye West, and he did have no idea what Kanye was, and this is quite funny. And then the last one is a tarot card reading with Jodorowsky at the MoMA, probably 10 years ago or more, probably 15 years ago. Anyway, enjoy.